Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Megan, and today I am going to share with you all of my 2022 reading goals and challenges. And then in association with that, I also want to share my reading affirmations, because as much as having reading goals and participating in reading challenges can be really fun and exciting and motivating, it can also add a lot of pressure and a lot of stress to reading. And for me, it's really important to remember that, one, my worth is not determined by how many books I'm able to read in a year or what kinds of books I read in my year, but also that I am just so glad and so grateful to be able to read at all and to be able to diversify my perspectives through reading. And so it's really important to me to have that reflection time and to have those affirmations to remind me of that. For doing this, I have even in my reading journal put my reading goals page and my reading affirmations page right next to each other. So anytime I'm checking in on my goals and seeing how I'm doing, I'm also checking in and being like, oh yeah, it's something that I do, this is for fun. To start out, I just want to say, I know this is quite an excessive list of goals. It is massive. There are so many books on here, and I think it will be a lot of fun. Basically, what happened was the start of the year came around, and I was like, oh, that challenge sounds interesting. That challenge sounds cool. And believe it or not, I actually cut out some challenges that I really want to do, and was like, I'll have to do these in future years because I already have so many. So with that being said, I do know that this is quite a lot. And I think for me, it is important to mention that I think that reading goals and challenges are exciting and interesting and they motivate me to read, but I am not too stubborn about finishing them. For example, last year my Goodreads goal was 100 books, and then I got to the end of the year and I just had a major reading slump and I didn't want to read at all. And so I spent like 3 months just not reading, and I only hit 56 books for the year, and that was okay. The goal still motivated me, I was still excited about it, and I was okay with the fact that I didn't finish it by the end of the year. So I think that whatever you want to do in terms of goals is totally great. If you want to read 1 book, if you want to read 100 books, if you want to read 300 books, anything is totally fine and totally wonderful. Reading is something that we do for fun and for us, and reading challenges are just a way to have even more fun with that and be motivated and enjoy it. And if reading challenges are going to stress you out, don't do them. But if reading challenges are going to be something that motivates you and makes you happy and makes you excited about reading, then totally do them and totally have fun with trying to use them to diversify your reading. So as with how most of these videos start, I will start with my Goodreads challenge goal, or another way of saying that is my number of books that I'm hoping to read this year. So I am hoping to read at least 100 books this year, which is pretty ambitious, but I'm actually doing pretty well so far. I'm 3 weeks into January and I am well above that goal. So now I'm kind of leaning towards like 150, but I still think that keeping the original goal at 100 and not being overly ambitious, especially with all of the other goals that I have on my list, is a good place to start. I think part of that, which is important to mention, is that for me, I want to be able to read lots of different types of books, and I don't want to limit myself to, it has to be a novel, it has to be 300 pages, it has to be, you know, nonfiction, it has to be fiction, it has to be, you know, anything specific. So some of these books are just little books that I got about bullet journaling, or one, it was only a 30-page book that was just a poem, or, you know, a lot of them are graphic novels, which only take a few hours to read. And I want to allow myself to be able to do that and to track those and to include that in my reading without having any expectations about whether that really counts as a book or not. So in addition to that goal, I think it is a nice corollary to have a pages goal, because like I said, some of these books are much shorter, some of these books are much longer, and so I originally wasn't planning on doing a pages goal because I really had no idea how many pages I should want to read, how many pages I would actually read, but I went through, and based on the number of books that I want to read and the types of books that I want to read and how long those are on average, I think 50,000 pages is a pretty reasonable goal for my reading this year. So I ended up setting my pages goal to 50,000. So the first thing I want to say before I get into the rest of my goals is that I am definitely double dipping and triple dipping and quadruple dipping. These book goals are such that I can use a book for one challenge and another challenge and another challenge and use it all over the place as long as it fits all of the criteria. The only thing is that I cannot use one book to fit multiple criteria within the same challenge. My next goal, and this will be a theme that kind of goes along with my whole series, is I want to diversify my reading. I want to diversify the formats of reading that I'm doing, the genres of reading, the authors that I'm reading, the countries I'm reading from, the experiences I'm reading about, the identities I'm reading about. All of those things are very important to me. So that leads us into my goal for diversifying genres, which is to read from 25 different genres. I want to try and read at least 3 books from each of these 25 different genres. And so I went through and picked genres, and there are 12 that are typically fiction, 1 that is typically fiction or nonfiction, and 12 that are typically nonfiction. And I'm planning on reading books from each of those categories. Some of these are genres that I read a lot of and that I'm very familiar with, and some of them I don't think I have ever read a book in that genre, so it will be very interesting to explore some new worlds and some new types of reading that I've never read before, and maybe I'll discover some that I really enjoy that I've never been exposed to before. My third challenge that I have for myself, I guess third, fourth, and fifth, which all kind of go together, are based on what kinds of books I want to read within my 100 books. So I'm hoping to have about 50% be fiction and 50% be nonfiction. So in order to enforce that goal, my goal is to read at least 50 books that are nonfiction this year. And then similarly, I want to read pretty equivalently from male and female authors. I also have a challenge that I'll talk about later for reading by authors who are representing different sexualities and gender identities outside of just the male-female binary. But within the male-female binary, I'm hoping to read 50% male, 50% female. And so that amounts to 50 books at least by women this year. And then finally, I think that reading audiobooks is a great way to get your reading in, and so I want to try and listen to at least 50 audiobooks this year. I think I am coming around to the format, and I think it's something that can be really helpful when I don't have the energy to read or the time to read and I'm cooking or working or doing other things. I can listen to an audiobook. So I think it's a great format, but it's something that has taken me a little while to come around to, and so I think having a goal of 50% audiobooks, or in other words 50 books that are audiobook this year, is a good way to enforce that. So those are my 3 50% goals. So I hadn't even realized that this was something that I did until I was listening to book podcasts, and I realized that the grand majority of my reading is by American authors, and that's something that I want to be cognizant of and be working on expanding my horizons and reading from authors from lots of different places, because America is definitely not the center of the world. It's not the only place that exists, and I want to read from authors from all over. Eventually, I'd like to expand this goal to an even higher percentage, and in fact, I'd like to also add a translated literature goal to this as well. But for right now, I want to start with 20% and just see what my end percentage ends up being, and get kind of a baseline for future years. So with that being said, my goal for this year is to read at least 20 books that are not American authors. So the next one is one of those things that has been going around. I saw it on Instagram. It was something where you read a book every single month recommended by someone in your life, or someone that you meet on Bookstagram, or wherever you get a recommendation from, just something that somebody else has recommended to you. And of course, being me and being overly ambitious, I was like, I'm not stopping at 12 books. I'm not going to do one every month. I am turning 25 this year. My birthday is in July, and so I decided to make this challenge the 25 books for 25 years. And so I talked to 25 different people that I care a lot about, that are in my life, friends, family members, loved ones, all across the spectrum, and got books from each of them. And so this is actually probably the challenge that I am the most dedicated to out of everything on this list. If I don't accomplish my number of pages, don't accomplish my number of books, don't accomplish my ratios or anything else, this is the challenge that I'm like, I will read all of these books during this year. So I have a list of 25 books that I have been recommended by people in my life, and I am planning on reading those this year. My next challenge is the A to Z challenge. This is one where I am definitely going to be drawing a lot on other challenges. So this is something that I will kind of be doing in the background, and I'll be focusing on reading different genres and reading different author types and reading from different places and all of the other like goals that I have on this list. And I'll be putting those books that I finish into the A to Z challenge. And as I get towards the end of the year, I'll look at what letters are more difficult and which ones I haven't done in the course of the year, and I will finish off the last few letters. But I think the grand majority of this challenge will be completed just in my natural course of reading. So this for me is actually two different challenges. The first one is A to Z challenge with titles, and the second one is A to Z challenge with authors' last names. One that will be very similar of, I think I will get a lot of these books taken care of just within the course of the year, especially if I'm being cognizant of it, is the Birth to Now challenge. So as I mentioned, I'm turning 25 this year. So I was born in 1997. So there'll actually be 26 years, 1997, 1998, 1999, all the way up to 2022. And I am wanting to read one book from every single year. Some of those years, like 2020, 2021, 2022, are going to be really, really easy to get done, whereas some of the older years, 97, 98, 99, I think will be much harder to get done, because a lot of the books that I'm picking up and a lot of the recommendations that I have are not older books, they're newer. So those will be something that I'll have to be cognizant of when I'm picking up books. And I think that's also a good way to diversify my reading, because as much as there's a lot of great literature that's coming out nowadays or in the last couple of years, there's also a lot of great books from the past as well, and I want to read those as well. One of those challenges that will be having me read a lot of more current books is reading all of the 2021 Goodreads Award winners. The next challenge that I have is reading one book from all 7 continents. So this one I think will actually be, I think South America, North America, Europe, and Asia will all come pretty naturally just in the course of my reading. But I think Australia, Africa, and Antarctica, I'll have to go out of my way a little bit to read something that I wouldn't typically read. And I'm excited to pick up some books from places and authors that I don't normally get to be exposed to. So now we get into the only 2 official challenges that I'll be doing that are like hosted by someone, and that is the Buzzword challenge by Booksandlala. Essentially, the Buzzword challenge, there's a different word or type of word for each month, and you read a book that has that in the title. So for example, the prompt for January is pick a book with who, what, when, where, why, or how in the title, and read that during the month of January. Or in the month of February, it's read a book with a pronoun in the title. So we, he, she, her, his, etc., etc. And so there are 12 different prompts for each of the 12 months, and I am going to do that each month. So the other official challenge I'm doing is the Mongan Moments Genre Diversity Challenge, and that one is similar in that there's a prompt for every month, and basically the prompt is read a book in the given genre for each month. So for example, January's prompt was read a memoir, and February's prompt is read a romance, and then there's 12 different ones for each of the 12 months. And I think especially this one correlates really well with my reading 3 books in each of 25 different genres, so I think those challenges overlap really nicely. So my local library also does a Reader's Choice contest where there are 20 nominees, and they are voted on by the library population during the spring, and then there's another contest that's repeated in the fall, and those 20 nominees are put to bat against each other, and based on the ratings, there's one that's chosen as the winner for Reader's Choice. And my goal is to read all of the nominees in the spring, and then once again read all of the nominees in the fall. My next goal is about improving myself and focusing on becoming the kind of person that I want to be. So associated with that, I want to read 10 self-help books within the year. So actually, compared to a lot of readers, I own relatively few books, but I still want to read the books that I do own, and there are quite a few that I haven't read yet. So I want to read at least 10 books that I own already during the year. Another one that's similar to a lot of other readers, I am in the middle of a lot of different series. I believe right now I'm in the middle of about 20 different series, but in January I'm starting a few more series, so I'll be at about 25 at the end of January. And I want to actually finish those series as long as I like them. And so my goal for the year is to finish at least 10 book series, which would still leave at least 15, if not a lot more, that are undone, but I think 10 is a good place to start for finishing book series. My next goal is kind of a 6-in-1. So I have a bunch of different types of books that I'd like to read at least one of them a month. The first one is a book in Spanish, so I wouldn't say I'm fluent, I wouldn't even really say I'm conversational, but I do know quite a bit of Spanish. I've been taking Spanish classes since elementary school. I took them in middle school, I took them in high school. I didn't end up taking any Spanish in college, but I did live in Costa Rica for 3 months and was able to practice my Spanish out there. So I'd like to continue improving my Spanish language skills, and the way that I'm planning on doing that is partly by reading books that are in Spanish. Another way that I do this is by watching TV shows in Spanish, but reading books in Spanish is the one that is relevant to this video. I think this book one, it's important to recognize that it also kind of is a 2-for-1 in the sense of I don't want to miss out on any of the important content in the book because I'm reading it in Spanish and I'm not as fluent with Spanish as I am with English. So for each of the books that I read in Spanish, I'm going to simultaneously read it in English, which is essentially like I'm going to read it twice. I would also like to read at least one graphic novel a month. This is something where I really haven't exposed myself to a lot of different graphic novels, and so I'm excited to explore a new format that I'm not very familiar with. Similarly, I want to read at least one poetry collection a month. The couple of poetry collections that I have read I think are really interesting. I think it's fun to read a different format that you don't usually read, so I'm excited to read more of those. The next one is a memoir. I think that for me, reading is a great way to understand other types of people that are different than me. And I think memoirs especially are a great way to get exposed to the stories and life experiences of other people. So I'm excited to focus on reading at least one of those every single month. The next two kind of go together. So I'll actually show a book really quickly. This is 12 Major World Religions by Jason Boyett, and so it takes the world religions and splits them into 12. So one important thing is it splits, so Christianity is not split into Catholicism and Mormonism and non-denominational Christianity and Protestantism and stuff. It's included as one singular religion, but that works out really well because there are 12 months in the year. So I think this is another one where it will help me understand other people and their lives a little bit more, to understand religions better, since it's such a huge part of humanity. So I want to read at least one book of scripture and at least one religious text every single month. So my next goal is my read 6 of each, which is essentially read one every 2 months. But I don't really care if I read, 6 of one in January and then 6 of another in February, or if I read, one of each in January, February, one of each in March, April. I don't really care what the spread is as long as I get in the number per year. So this goal is kind of a 12-in-1 in the sense that I have 12 different categories for my read 6. So I'll go through those relatively quickly because there's a lot of them. The first one is short story collection. The second one is classic. Third one is historical fiction. Fourth one is gender or sexual identity. So this would be homosexual, bisexual, asexual, agender, non-binary, transgender, anything that falls under gender or sexual identity. The next one is illness. So this could include mental illness or physical illness, anything that falls under that category. There's a category called extra suggestions, which is when I asked for the 25 suggestions from people, I realized that people are happy to suggest books for you, which is great, but I ended up getting way more suggestions than what fit into that list where I only had one per person, and so I do want to work through those. I'm excited to have those, and so I want to read at least 6 of those during the year. Next one is another formatting thing. I'd like to read at least 6 middle grade books. I do read a lot of both adult and young adult. I don't really have a preference specifically about adult versus young adult, but I've noticed that I don't necessarily prioritize middle grade, which is interesting because I have gone through like a lot of the books that I've liked and a lot of the books that I've read recently, and I do like a lot of middle grade, and there also are a lot on my TBR of middle grade I'd like to read. So I think reading at least 6 this year would be a good goal. Similarly, another formatting type book, I'd like to read at least 6 books in verse. I've heard, I honestly don't think I've ever read a book in verse, but I've heard a lot of great things about different books in verse where people are like, talk about how eloquent they can be and how beautiful and poetic. And so I would really like to take advantage of that and to learn about that world and read more books in verse. Next is another representation one. This is, I'd like to read at least 6 books by Asian authors. So this kind of goes along with non-American authors, but I don't want my non-American authors to strictly be like British or French or German. I'd like to also read a fair number from Asian authors. Next is queer retellings. So I'd like to read 6 different queer retellings, and I do have picked out what I went through and made a list of different stories and retellings associated with those stories, and so I have those picked out already, but I want to read 6 queer retellings this year. I want to read 6 books that have been adapted to TV or movies, and then associated with that, I want to watch the TV show or movies that are associated with that adaptation. I think this would also be really interesting on the channel to compare like the TV show or the movie to the book. And similarly, there are a fair number of books that are actually translated into multiple different movies or multiple different TV shows because they're so popular. And I think that would also be interesting, is comparing the book to multiple different adaptations and seeing which one I like the most. Okay. And then my final one of read 6 is loved authors. So I have gone through and picked 6 different authors that I have loved, and I want to read another book by each of those authors. My next goal you guys could actually help me with. So I want to read every book by one author, but I have not picked my author yet. So if you have any suggestions for an author that I should choose for this, feel free to comment down below. Then all the rest of my goals are still reading related, but they are not, they're not like challenges or specific things about like read this many books of this type of thing, read this many books from this type of thing. They're more just like reading related. So the first one of those is to participate in at least 3 book clubs this year. The second one is to buddy read once a month with my friend named Jess. The next one is to listen to bookish podcasts at least 10 times. And then I want to explore at least 5 used bookstores. And then my final 2 are to update and sort my TBR, and then to create a reading journal and maintain it for at least 12 months. Those are all of the goals that I'm planning on doing in 2022. I understand that it's quite a lot, but I will keep you guys updated on how it is going. So before I close out the video, I wanted to read to you guys all of my reading affirmations for the year. I knew I wanted to do this, but I wasn't sure exactly what would be good to put in a reading affirmation. So this is actually from an article. So it's not exactly like word for word, but a lot of the reading affirmations I pulled from a Book Riot article that I'll link down below in the description. So these are the 15 reading affirmations that I have for 2022. Number 1, I am grateful for my passion and love for books. Number 2, I am grateful for libraries. Number 3, I am grateful for the opportunity to be literate. Number 4, I am grateful for book recommendations from others. Number 5, I am grateful that I have time to read. Number 6, I am proud of myself for prioritizing diverse reading. Number 7, I am proud of my eagerness to explore. Number 8, I am proud of my intellectual curiosity. Number 9, I am proud of my ability to restart and retry. Number 10, I am proud that I am expanding my worldview. Number 11, I will let myself read whatever I want. Number 12, I won't judge myself when I don't want to read. Number 13, I will use reading to challenge my beliefs. Number 14, I won't determine my worth based on the number of books I read. And number 15, I will celebrate my reading successes and forgive my reading failures. Thank you so much for watching my video. I would love to chat with you guys in the comments, so feel free to comment about any reading goals and challenges or affirmations that you have for this year, or if you would like to do any of these challenges with me or buddy read anything, definitely let me know. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a wonderful day. Goodbye.